serving the Delaware Valley with the best music and the best talk.
The views and opinions expressed on the following program do not necessarily reflect that of radio station WVLT, Clear Communications Incorporated, its staff and management, or our sponsors. WVLT, Clear Communications Incorporated, retains the right to record all phone calls received during this program for future promotions.
Good evening, everyone. This is InformTheVoteNJ Radio Hour here, cruising 92.1 WVLT here in Vineland, New Jersey. Tonight, I'm sitting with Terri Reese, who is a prospective CD-2 congressional candidate in the Democrat primaries. And before we get into the interview, as usual, I'm going to read my introductory report to help set the tone and give updates. So, how InformTheVoteNJ is developing moving forward, or the process verification check. Over the past 2.5 years, the mission behind InformTheVoteNJ has become a lot clearer. When I first opened my sample ballot and saw no links to bios, campaign sites, interviews, etc., meaning no directly realistic way to figure out who the candidates were, I dug around for 6 weeks and found next to nothing. So I decided to make a simple repository website as I found info bit by bit. I thought if I could just gather everything in one place, it would save voters the hours of scavenger hunting I had been doing. But as I got deeper into it, I started to realize something. That kind of information doesn't appear automatically. You can't just wait for candidates to produce thorough background pages or explain their platforms in detail. Many don't. So the project expanded. I wrote questionnaires, I began offering interviews, I added a weekly radio show, I started attending public meetings, not only as a voter, but as press, introducing myself early so candidates knew I was trying to provide coverage. And then I found myself at community events, fundraisers, meet and greets, wherever the political conversations were happening, because that was often the only way to collect the pieces of a candidate's story. And then I realized a second truth. If I have to go to 19 different events to understand who's running for office, that means the average voter is effectively being asked to do something totally unreasonable. That's where my new idea of a process verification check comes in. It isn't endorsement like I've been accused of in the past. And to be fair, I understand why some people perceive my language that way, because it is the default political campaign language. But that's not really what I'm doing. I'm thinking more in terms of a way to evaluate whether candidates actually participate in the modern expectations of transparency and voter accessibility. Did they build a robust, comprehensive, fully detailed campaign site? Did they show up for interviews? Did they participate in forums? Do they respond when asked to clarify their positions? Do they follow through? Or do they smile for a month and disappear? And perhaps equally as important, how do they behave through that process? Because transparency is not just about content, it's about character. Someone who cooperates, communicates clearly, and shows respect for the electorate is showing you how they will handle public responsibility long before they even win a seat. Consider the opposite, where sometimes candidates don't participate, make wildly unforced errors, or coast somewhere in between while hoping it gets unnoticed. I'd say that's pretty important information for voters to have, in addition to policy and vibes. So, where Terri Reese currently stands in the process. Given all that, it's important to note that so far, Terri Reese is doing quite well on that process side. She has a campaign website. She's already done multiple podcast interviews. She did a forum in West Cape May. She held a public campaign kickoff event, and she's here tonight for a full radio interview. That level of participation is not the norm in Cumberland County, at least not consistently. And because her background and campaign message are already accessible, it gives us a not-so-common chance tonight to skip over the usual 20 minutes of introductory softball questions and instead explore the next layer, the actual mechanics behind some of her proposals. Not adversarially, not as a debate, but in the interest of clarity. Because that's what voters deserve when they're deciding who to send to Congress. And a brief review of Terri Reese's message and where we'll be digging deeper. Before we get into the interview itself, here's a quick overview of how Terri describes herself and what she's running on for those who haven't already watched her publicly available stuff, and for those of you who wouldn't mind a reminder for context. And if I get any of this wrong, please correct me.
Okay.
Terri presents herself as a progressive citizen Democrat, someone whose political identity comes from lived experience rather than a long career in government. She has more than 30 years of experience managing large teams, multi-million-dollar budgets, and complex operations in both retail and tech project management. She emphasizes being able to translate complicated information into plain language, a skill she believes is crucial for reading bills and communicating with constituents. On the personal side, she talks openly about raising kids as a single parent, navigating unemployment, and caregiving for her mother with dementia. These experiences shape her platform on affordability, healthcare, and elder care. Her policy message focuses heavily on the cost of living crisis, wages not keeping up with housing, utilities, groceries, childcare, and medical costs. She supports a federal living wage, expanded healthcare access, increased housing supply, stronger renter protections, and a range of tax reforms aimed at shifting the burden away from working families. Now, because Terri has already covered these broad themes in past interviews and her response to my questionnaire, tonight is an opportunity to explore the next layer below the surface. For example, she has proposed lifting the Social Security payroll tax cap as a way to fund the program long term. That raises a natural question for listeners. What exactly does lifting the cap mean in mathematical and structural terms? Does it preserve the traditional insurance-style payout structure, or does it change the nature of the program entirely? She has also suggested adding more brackets to the progressive tax code, but that conversation in her earlier interview drifted off during natural conversation. So tonight we'll be asking what her actual vision looks like, how many layers she imagines, where the thresholds would be, and how those layers interact with other proposals. And then there's her cost of living tax cut, which is based on what I assume is the national median cost of living for a single adult. Listeners may naturally wonder, how is that median calculated? What data set is it based on? Is it geographically adjusted? Yada, yada, yada. None of those are adversarial questions. They're just clarity questions, the kind any informed voter would want answered. So tonight's conversation will focus less on who Terri is and more on how she thinks through these ideas, how her proposals actually work, and what the mechanisms would look like if she were elected to Congress. With that context in mind, here we go, Terri.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, Steve.
Of course. So then, that was very long-winded, and I also don't want to skip over anything. So if there's anything about your background you want to emphasize or add or anything like that, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, as you said, I am running as a progressive citizen Democrat, and I want to thank you for allowing your listeners to hear from all candidates, regardless of party affiliation. So as a progressive citizen first Democrat, it means that my politics come from lived experience, not ideology. I'm a citizen of my district, and I have shared life experiences and the same struggles that my neighbors have done so as well. So I'm running because I don't believe that we have a money problem in this country. We have a priorities problem. And I don't begrudge anyone their success. I believe anyone can be rich and successful, but in the wealthiest country in the world, I don't think anyone should be poor or starving. And my campaign is about fixing that and building a government that works for the people, for the regular people again, so we can all get ahead, put something away, and watch our children succeed and excel.
Cool. All right. Well, then let's move on to the ideological section that we addressed in the questionnaire.
Okay.
So one thing that I've noticed, before, that chair tends to shrink. So if you want to, all right, I just wanted to not necessarily tower over you unnecessarily. So anyway, so I've noticed over the past couple years, sometimes the ideological beliefs of candidates get a little bit confusing. And so let's start with that. You call yourself a progressive citizen Democrat. The progressive world is kind of confusing right now. You've got socialist rhetoric going around. The House recently voted to condemn socialism. And even here in this region, I've asked other candidates questions about, like, do you align with Zohran Mamdani? And then I get, like, answers that are, like, half yes and half no and all that kind of stuff. So where do you place yourself on that kind of spectrum? Like, are you super far left? Are you, like, moderate Democrat? All that kind of stuff.
I really don't like to label myself or other people. So when I say that I'm a citizen first progressive Democrat, I mean that the beliefs that I hold are grounded in fairness, integrity, compassion, accountability, and opportunity that are shaped by real life experience. So for me, being a progressive means that we're about making progress. We're about moving forward, having systems that work for everyone, not just the wealthy or well-connected, have a fair shot. And it's really not about being left or right. It's about moving forward and shifting our country's priorities so families can live, work, learn, age with dignity. It's about the same issues that we keep rehashing the same issues administration after administration for the last 60 years, which to me is the definition of insanity. You know, you keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And that's what I want to do, is I believe that in progressivism, we're looking at outcomes, not slogans. We want to have policies that strengthen our communities and help working families thrive, which is what I support. Let's make it better for everyone so we can move forward together into the next decade and beyond, as opposed to being regressive and then having to play catch up, 4, 5, 6 years down the line.
So your main focus with your ideology is on the outcomes. You don't care so much about the labeling and the categorizations ideologically.
Right. It's all about people. It's all about people and moving people forward. And if you want to call that progressive, great. If you want to call it leftist, great, or whatnot. But it's really about moving the needle so that we all have the chance to thrive. So not just survive.
Okay, cool. And then that kind of brings up another common theme that I've noticed over the past couple years. So I've noticed several candidates who are under a major party ticket or label, but then they talk more like an independent and anti-establishment. So then can you help clarify, you're still technically labeled a Democrat and you're running in the Democrat primary?
Correct.
And so how does that work out in the sense of, would you say that you're running sort of as an anti-establishment person or as an independent, or how does that fit together?
So again, I consider myself a citizen Democrat first, a progressive second. So our founding fathers, yes, they made mistakes. They had some issues, but when they were crafting our government and how it was set up, the House of Representatives was meant to be filled with people who are representative of their districts, representative of their communities, their constituency, and stuff like that. So that's what I am first. I'm a representative of this district. I, again, shared the same struggles and have the same experiences, the vast majority of the people who live here. And I align with the Democrats because my mother had always said the Democrats are for helping people. Like that's the main gist of their entire platform. Some of the things that I talk about are definitely anti-establishment because I'm not for the moneyed classes. And again, it has nothing to do with begrudging anyone their success. I think that's great. I'll be your biggest cheerleader. But the thing is, at what point is enough? At what point is too much, ridiculously too much, when one person has the ability, their ability to end hunger in the United States themselves, and they choose to buy Twitter instead. So it's like really looking at what the priorities are, and that's where I think I lean towards the anti-establishment and the more progressive and the more left of the ideas. But I don't really like to look at labeling. I want to work for the people that live here and make their lives better.
Right. So you're going to focus on listening to the constituents, what their needs are, and then bringing that to Congress and making sure those needs are being addressed properly. Right.
And enacting change that enables those changes to happen.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So then I think part of my questions are going to circle back to that to a certain extent, but just following my outline.
Excellent.
Let's go to one of your proposals, which I think came up during the 75 podcast. Is that what that thing was called?
Money Out of Politics? Yep.
Yeah. So you brought up the Social Security tax cap, which why don't we set the tone for what that topic is, just for people who may not already be familiar with that. So what's going on with Social Security? How does it function? And what do you see as the current problem?
Okay. So as all working people know, okay, we have roughly 6.2% of our pay withheld that goes to Social Security, and that is matched by our employers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And that works for everybody up to an income of roughly $169,000.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you make $170,000 or $200,000, you're only paying or contributing into Social Security that 6.2% up to that $169,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So somebody that has an inordinate amount of wealth, makes huge amounts of money in the course of a year, they may only pay into Social Security for, if we pick someone like Elon Musk,
that's where my mind was going.
5 seconds, maybe, something along those lines, if that at all. So if we lift, and when I was really thinking about this, I had just read an article that morning where it had said that by 2033, one of two things would happen, and that is that the Social Security Trust Fund would either be defunct, or there was the other one where if you are drawing Social Security by 2033, you will only be able to get 81% of what you're due.
Right.
So two different
assuming
stories.
We go on the current trajectory.
Yeah, so there were those. And so when you look into it, it's like, well, what happens if we lift the payroll tax cap, which means that it doesn't stop at that $169,000, that if everyone, regardless of how much you make, pays that 6.2%.
Yep.
Going in there, okay? And so somebody who makes $500,000 a year, instead of paying $10,000, which is the 6.2%, okay, they would pay $31,000. All right, and that would go on. So this change could generate tens of billions of dollars more each year, and which the Congressional Budget Office estimates could fully fund Social Security for the next 75 years without cutting any benefits. So to me, that's a no-brainer, because it shifts Social Security slightly toward redistribution, where high earners would contribute more than the benefits they receive, while lower and middle class workers would continue to get benefits based on their contributions. But it keeps Social Security strong, fair, and closer to its original goal as both an insurance and a progressive social safety net. Cool.
So then, just for further clarification, would it be a total lift, as in, we're using hypothetically Elon Musk as an example, that 6.2% would apply to his entire income?
Yes.
Okay. And so then, would there be some sort of differentiation to be made where a possibility of raising the cap up until the point where it's simply solvent, as opposed to going beyond? Because I think the original idea was for it to be a floor level safety net or insurance plan. And once you get past the solvency, right, then is there actually a need to keep paying even beyond that?
Well, and that's the thing that we have to explore. Mm-hmm. So that's why, as we move forward, we can address that as we see that it's become solvency and there isn't as much a draw, that there isn't as many, there aren't as many people paying into it as what's receiving it. So right now we have an abundance of people who are paying into Social Security versus the people who are receiving it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there is a surplus each year, right today, like right now.
Sure.
That's not necessarily going to happen as we see the people continue to age and live longer and be able to access these benefits. And then when we get to a point, if we lift the cap and we're able to look at it and say, you know what, we are now solvent, we've now seen for the last 5-10 years that we don't have this, we can now look at this in a different aspect and change it. But right now what we see is, I mean, I'm sure you recall this as well, it just seems like every year we talk about a budget, Social Security gets punched around. Maybe we need to take from it, maybe we don't, maybe we need to get rid of it, maybe we need, all of the stuff. It's like, let's do this one thing. That's okay, where we can do this. Yeah. We can raise this payroll tax cap.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the plan of what it's going to do. And we we revisit it in 15-20 years to see how it's working and what we need to do to adjust.
So it sounds like you're saying the pendulum's too far this way.
Yes.
Let's go this way for several years, see how it goes.
Yes.
And if it's too far that way, then we adjust back to the middle.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we can see where it's
going.
And
then the final clarification question there would be, you would leave the payouts the same as like the floor payout, as in hypothetically Elon Musk wouldn't get $2 billion back because that's what he paid in percentage.
Right. No, there's a floor payout, and I think too what we need to do is take a look at that as how it is raised due to the cost of living each year. I know that when my mom was on Social Security, she got a 2.6 to 3% cost of living increase over the course, yearly. And depending on how much you make, that can be very little. It can be whatever. Hers averaged to about $200 more a month. Mm-hmm. Which, that can help pay for her prescriptions.
Yep.
Or maybe a little, new clothes this month, or maybe she needed like a different type of durable metal equipment, something like that. Mm-hmm. But it definitely needs to be livable for the people who are on it.
Right. So, I mean, the main idea, or I think the point of clarification we got is, the pendulum's too far this way.
Yes.
Let's go that way for a couple years and see how it goes. And if it's too far the other way, then we'll swing back until the magical balance point is reached. Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool. So then, I think in that same interview, you brought up the idea of a progressive tax system with additional layers. Mm-hmm. But you guys briefly touched on that, and then the conversation went in a different direction. Mm-hmm. So then can you help unpack how many layers and where the thresholds would be for a more progressive tax system? And actually, before we totally unpack it, for anybody who's not super familiar, let's set the context. What is the current tax system? What does it look like to you? And why it's not good enough, and why the change you're proposing seems necessary to you?
Sure. So currently with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, we saw a huge transfer of wealth from the working class up to the wealthiest among us. Mm-hmm. So you're able to say that if you look at the numbers, that they're actually paying more in a percentage-wise, compared to the percentage that somebody who is the working poor or the middle class. And you can say, so if I look at the percentages, that makes sense then. But when you look at the dollars, it doesn't make sense. And that's what we're going for.
Can you illustrate that a little bit?
So and I'm going to use it with just round numbers.
Sure.
Okay. So if somebody makes $100 a week and they pay 10% of their tax, that means they're left with $90 to spend. Okay. If somebody makes $1,000 a week and they're taxed at 10%, they have $900 to spend. Okay, so we have that. But what we see is that the working class may be taxed 10%, which means they're having that they make $1,000, they get $900 that they get to spend. But then you have the wealthier ones that might be taxed less than 10% because it's going to be more money. So maybe they're only doing 5%.
Why would it be less? Oh,
because they're making more money. So if they're making $10,000, but they're only being taxed on 5% or 5%. Okay,
oh, is that how it's set up currently?
As opposed to 10%, yes.
Oh, okay.
So 10% of 10,000 will be 1,000, but if they're only 5, they're only paying 500.
Right.
So
you're saying not only does the percentage go down, I would assume you're also implying that the impact on somebody who's wealthier, it's not even like a drop in the bucket to them.
Correct.
Right. So it affects the lower income people way more.
Right.
And the people at the top are not even doing the same percentage.
Right. And they're not feeling it. We know that when I heard this analogy once where it was, if I have $20, okay, and because I'm from a working class background, and I have that $20 of disposable income, and I decide that I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to spend that $20 at a local small business, okay? That puts that $20 in the hands of that local small business, and then they're going to use that $20 to buy more goods, help pay their employees and whatnot. So they pay their employees. Their employees take their portion of that $20 and they go and they spend it someplace else, and it continues to go on where it gets recycled throughout the community. When you have somebody who has an inordinate amount of wealth, okay, they're not supporting their local communities.
Right.
All right. And I'm going to use Jeff Bezos as an example. So he could have spent $50 billion and gotten married anywhere. He went to Venice. Okay, so Venice is beautiful. One of my favorite cities in the world. Absolutely love it. It did great for their economy. That's fantastic. But what does he do here to support his community here?
I don't know if you've seen this, but I think it might have been a TED Talk or just a random cartoon where they illustrate this. It's like a corporation comes in, they take or they get money from the local community, but then they spend it overseas or somewhere else, and it's the money is not circulating back into the community which spent the money to the corporation.
Exactly.
And so the money gets sucked out, basically.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. So what I'm talking about with progressive tax bracket expansions, and a lot of this comes to a lot of my policies come from not only things that I've thought about and like how do we make this better, but I saw a really interesting interview with Erica Payne, who is the president and founder of Patriotic Millionaires, with Katie Fang. And she talks about they have this money agenda they're like, we make a lot of money, okay, and we think we need to be taxed more, and we think this is what you need to do in order to make it happen. So I looked at a lot of her policies and I was like, what, I think that this is really, really good, and it makes a lot of sense. The issue is that it's not all the millionaires. It's this group of patriotic millionaires that talk about these policies to get it that want it, whereas opposed then you have others that are like, no, we like our greed and we covet our things and we're going to live there. But anyway,
keep your hands off of my pot.
Exactly. So I think that a tax system that would be fairer, that would ensure that ultra high earners contribute equitably, would have some new upper income tax brackets. And I want to be very, very clear. This isn't talking about everyday people. This isn't talking about, the bottom 95%. Okay, because a lot of times when you hear, they want to raise taxes, that they stop listening. No. It's not on people like you. It's not on people like me. It's not on the people who are out, working every day out in their communities.
Right.
We're talking about people who 157,000 people. Okay.
In the world, or
in the country,
or in the country
that make more than $2 million a year.
Okay.
All right, and raise their tax bracket to maybe 40%.
And what is it currently at?
It's at, I believe, it was at 35 or less, 32.
Right. So we're kind of circling back to the idea that it's not going to impact them all that much.
Right, because the top bracket that's right now is for people who make, I want to say it's like maybe 500,000 and above, and then it stops, and then that's it.
Right.
Okay. So if we add another layer where we have those people who are making $2 million a year or more, and we add it to that, but then you get to people who are making $10 million or more. which is your ultra high income bracket. That's only 3,173 people.
And then what would the layer be?
And that
for
could be up to like 45%. All right. And then if you look at people who are the super wealthy, people who make more than like 25 or $50 million a year, okay, which now we're looking at 205 people, okay, and we make that as a separate surtax of 5 to 10% on income above that level.
Right. Okay.
Okay. They're conceptual ranges, and they reflect mainstream economic research, recommendations, like I said, about this group, the Patriotic Millionaires, and historical norms from we saw periods of great U.S. growth, when the top tax rate was over 70% in the 50s.
Right.
And
so you're not even going that far.
No. And the thing about that, too, is at that time, it's also when union membership in this country was at its highest, and wealth inequality was at its lowest.
Right.
Okay? So the goal is to restore the fairness while funding programs that will benefit working families and strengthen the economy. Because as I said, and I know I sound like a broken record, our country doesn't have a money problem, it has a priorities problem.
Right.
And the priority for too long has been these 157,000 people and above that make this as inordinate wealth to just keep accumulating more, while the wages and the it's not cost of living that I want to say, but the way that we're just living every day continues to go down. Standard of living.
Yeah, quality of life.
The quality of life, the standard of living goes down. And that's what we do. We do that. We do it forward. Is it going to be reality? We would get significant pushback from the people who are the wealthy donors that go in, put money into the coffers. But I think that it could be packaged in such a way and get support from people, because we are seeing that there are more working class people being elected into Congress and in the Senate. And as we see more and more of that happen, and less of these entrenched incumbents who have these wealthy donors, or they're in the pockets of these wealthy donors to do what it is that they want, that's when we can see really good effective change.
Right. So you're basically circling back to one of your earlier comments, where the foundation is when is enough. But I guess, and we don't have to get into like a back and forth about this, but I would imagine a lot of conservative leaning people are like, we already pay too much. That would be the argument. So I don't want to give any more anyway. You know what I mean?
Right. And the thing is, too, is I would say to them, and what is your, if you'd like to share it, what is your annual income? And I can pretty much say that I can guarantee that they're going to say that their annual income is less than what these rates are here.
So it wouldn't affect them.
It wouldn't affect them.
Right.
Okay. This is affecting people who are what we call like the super rich, the ultra rich.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So then the next thing was the cost of living tax cut and cost of living wage. I'm kind of putting these together because you're proposing a federal tax cut. Is that what it would be?
So this again was an idea that I saw from the Patriotic Millionaires that I was like, why hasn't anyone thought of this before?
Okay.
And what they had talked about is a cost of living tax cut that would use a national median cost of living, which what she had said was $45,700. That's across the country. So it's definitely going to be higher in states like New Jersey and California. It could potentially be lower in states like Mississippi, West Virginia.
So because this was one of my clarification questions, that's a literal median.
That's the literal median as of today for the country.
And that's what you would be applying?
Potentially.
Okay.
What I'm saying. And that base wouldn't be taxed. So if you made $100,000 a year, okay, you wouldn't be taxed on the first $45,700
right.
of it. Okay? If you made $33,000 a year, you wouldn't get taxed at all.
Okay.
Because it's below that amount.
Okay.
Okay? And this ensures that the working people can cover essential expenses without being overburdened by federal taxes.
Okay.
Okay? Now, where that happens, and we talk about a living wage, I believe that the wages should be set at the same standard, where we're ensuring the pay aligns with the actual local needs rather than just an arbitrary number. So right now it's still $7.25, which is just ridiculous.
Excuse me.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the
That's the
federal minimum
wage.
wage, but reframed or rehashed so that it reflects the cost of living.
As a living wage. Like, what does it cost to live in this area? Okay, minimally, for somebody to be able to afford housing, food, transportation, healthcare, And again, there's an MIT living wage calculator that's really, really interesting, where you can actually look and see, so what would be the living wage per hour of somebody who lives in New Jersey if they're a single person with no dependents,
right.
if they have 4 dependents, and compare that to somebody who lives in, like I said, West Virginia or Mississippi. Like, you can actually look and see what the differences are.
I've
there.
used that thing before.
Yeah. But it's rooted in fairness. Yes, it is a redistribution principle, giving families and single adults the breathing room they need while directly helping working people and not just allowing the wealthy to continue to accumulate more.
Right. So then, the basic clarification in my head was, how do you ensure that gets redistributed fairly all over the place,
Which are we talking about? The living wage?
Well, it would be both, I suppose, because they're both related to the cost of living.
Right. Yeah.
So you would literally go into that calculator for each area and adjust for each individual?
Well, I think what would have to happen is it would, not for necessarily each individual, but for each state and the locations in that state. Because we do know that, for instance, the cost of living in Cumberland County is going to be different than the cost of living in Bergen County.
Right, of course.
Okay? So this is something that would have to be worked at the federal level, where we say this is what has happened, and the states would then implement what would be relative to their states.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, it wouldn't be fair to say to somebody who lives, for instance, in Bergen County, so the living wage is $15 an hour when it's really $30 an hour.
Right.
Okay? Or conversely, although I'm sure it would be fantastic for somebody who lived in a poorer county to say, oh, you're going to get $30 an hour, but then how does that area support that number?
Yeah.
So it's working on both of those at the federal level with the states to make it happen, to ensure that everything's fair and people can afford to live where they live.
Gotcha. All right. Okay, and then there was the Equal Tax Act. So, that was in relation to the capital gains, and so, and that was over $1 million. So, Can you set the premise or the context for what you think is happening now, why it might be a problem, and the adjustment you want to make?
Okay, so capital gains are the profit that you realize from selling your assets.
Right.
Okay. So if you bought stocks at $25 a share, but you sold them at $100 a share, that's $75 a share are your capital gains.
Yep.
Okay, so we have that. So what happens is right now, I'm having a brain fart here.
No, take your time.
Okay, so it means that the annual capital gains over $1 million, again, this isn't something that's going to affect everyday people like you and me, okay? It would be nice if it did, but it doesn't. That they're taxed the same rate as ordinary wages. So right now, the max rate is 20%.
For taxing a capital
Gains, yeah, okay, 20%. But then there's also, you can defer your gains. And you can, there's also carried interest that goes with that. And then there's also like-kind exchanges with real estate that go beyond all of that and mess them all up. But right now, the wealthiest Americans pay lower rates on their investment income than we do on our wages. So if they make if they make the same amount on their income from their investments, okay, that you or I make is from working, they pay less of a tax than what we pay.
So you're saying, hypothetically, if I make $60,000 a year and somebody makes $60,000 in capital gains, they get taxed less on that $60,000 of income, whatever, however you want to label that, than somebody who actually went out and worked.
Correct.
So, do you know the steelman argument for that?
No, share it with me.
I don't.
Okay.
I'm asking. I don't know why people would set that up that way, unless I'm doing mental gymnastics now. But I guess the idea would be trickle down economics, like let the people invest in a way that creates more wealth and more jobs and blah 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 blah.
It goes along the lines of what Jack Ciattarelli's lieutenant governor running mate had said, that you can't tax the millionaires because they're the ones that supply all the jobs.
Right.
And it's like, no, you need to tax people fairly so that they're contributing to our society.
Right.
Okay.
It can't just be endless hoarding.
It just can't be endless hoarding while the working class struggles.
Right.
So there are loopholes in this as well. So as I started to say, the current preferential tax treatment on these long-term capital gains, which are taxed at a maximum of 20%. So it's not even a flat 20%, it's a maximum 20%, compared to the top ordinary income tax rate of 37%.
Right.
All right.
Got it.
So the goal is to equalize these rates. And there's a couple of different things that are happening right here. So we have this, what they call the stepped up basis at death, or the angel of death loophole. When you ask me to dig into things, I dig into things. Okay.
That sounds awesome.
So
just from like a guy, you know what I mean? Like the angel of death. Yes. Do it.
So under the current law, when an individual dies, the cost basis of their assets given to their heirs is stepped up to the full market value at the time of death.
Well, okay, wait. I spaced out for a second. Slow that down for a second so I can follow it.
Under the current law, when an individual dies, the cost basis of their assets given to their heirs is stepped up to the fair market value at the time of death.
Okay.
Which erases any capital gains tax liability on the appreciation that occurred during the original owner's lifetime. Now, again, this isn't something that's going to affect everyday people.
Right.
All right. So you have somebody who invested in real estate, we'll say, and they bought that real estate for $1 million. Okay. It's now worth $10 million. Okay. So they have a capital gains realization of $9 million. Okay. And they pass away. In their estate, that now goes that it's valued at $10 million. It doesn't say that it has a capital gains of $9 million. It just says, so it's worth $10 million. Period. End of story. So there's no tax.
Oh. Okay.
When it's transferred to the heirs. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So taxing the gains as ordinary income would be imposing a tax on these large unrealized gains.
Okay, so
but above a certain exemption amount. So I had this discussion with a relative who was upset because when his wife's aunt passed away, they had to pay, he was like, death taxes. And I'm like, well, there are estate taxes that get paid, but most of us don't have to pay the federal taxes because we're not getting that much money.
Right.
Okay? And then depending on your state, it determines what level of a beneficiary you are. So like if you're a first beneficiary, you don't have to pay anything. But if you go down the lines where you're just a friend or a neighbor and they left you money, then you may have a higher tax burden that could be like 15%. So my mom had received a small inheritance from a family friend, but because she wasn't a relative, she wasn't a child, she wasn't, any kind of kin, she had to pay 15% on that, which is, okay, that's the way that it works.
Sure.
That's just, it wasn't, we weren't going to fight it. We weren't, that's just, we understood that this is the process that it follows.
So basically what you're saying is because that $10 million home transferred as an inheritance to somebody in their family, all the potential capital gains are now erased.
Correct.
Very interesting.
Okay, but that's why you can do like an exemption amount as to what goes, and that's what builds.
What do you mean by the exemption amount?
You can set an amount to say like if the capital gain, maybe it's only 50% capital gains that gets taxed instead of the
full 100.
The full 100.
Right. So you'd be taxing 4.5 million instead of 9.
Right, and it could be that and
because that does bring up a very interesting concept because the person receiving the inheritance didn't necessarily have anything to do with the purchase of the home, holding onto the home, and blah, blah, blah. But on the flip side, they're not necessarily losing anything. They're still getting the home. So how would they pay that tax without selling the home? Does that make sense?
Right. So I'm using that as a broad example because somebody who's going to have a $10 million home in all likelihood isn't just bequeathing just the home.
True.
All right. So you look at the all assets. I pick the one home as just like let's look at this one thing.
Yeah.
So you group it together and you look at it and you see, so what is it that we have that has to get paid? And again, we're talking about people with intergenerational wealth that is so huge that although we dream about it, we are so far from that because we're much closer to being homeless.
Right. Yeah, I know.
You know? So
I guess that is a recurring point that needs to be emphasized. We're not talking about somebody who got like $30,000 of an inheritance. We're talking about somebody who's probably getting like 20 million or something like that,
or 100 million or 200 million, or and that. But then you also look at the deferral of the gains, which the U.S. tax code generally only taxes gains when an asset is sold. Okay? So this allows wealthy individuals to hold on to appreciated assets for decades without paying any tax at all. So that's how you get this house or these stocks or whatever that are now worth a ridiculous amount of money when they paid pennies on the dollar. So you could look at maybe a taxing unrealized gains on a periodic basis or a death.
Right.
So you have that. There's also the carried interest, which is a loophole that refers to a portion of an investment fund manager's earnings that's currently taxed at the lower long-term capital gains rate, even though it functions as regular compensation. Okay? So, again, if we tax capital gains as ordinary wages, that would eliminate this favorable treatment. And then there's what they call the like-kind exchanges, which allows investors to defer capital gains tax on the sale of certain real estate if they reinvest the proceeds into a like-kind property within a specific time frame. So that allows wealth to grow tax deferred indefinitely. So for instance, you buy a house for $1 million, you sell it for 10, but you buy another $10 million home.
Right.
So you're not paying anything on the receipt that's there.
Right.
So if we're and again, we're talking about taxing capital gains for high income earners, intergenerational wealth, which would remove the existing financial incentives to structure investments for long-term capital gains treatment and change the effectiveness of the wealth transfer and tax deferral strategies so that we're not getting people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and the Trump family, that just get this inordinate amount of wealth and just pass it on without doing anything. Now, I just want to say, I am well aware that there are some people who have taken the giving pledge, and I'll use Melinda French Gates and Mackenzie Scott Bezos, okay, that received billions of dollars in divorce settlements and are giving it away. And I think that is what you do to support people. You don't really hear that much about what they're doing until the group that they gave the money to decides to announce it, because they're not out there saying, oh, I just donated all of this money. They donate it first. And it's something that's like a recurring theme that I say is like, for those who have so much, it's really good to give back and help your communities. And and if more people did that, we probably wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation.
Yeah, the main point being whether the amount of wealth is like egregiously high, and are they willing to give back a fair share? And okay, so then you propose something called the Anti-Oligarch Act, which sounds very close to what we were just talking about. So do you want to provide context about what that means, especially if it's slightly different than what we were just talking about? Yeah,
so there are senators, both sides, Senator Wyden and Senator Warren, have brought up similar policies to push through the Senate so that we're taxing the true economic income of billionaires while also placing annual taxes on extreme concentrations of wealth. And it means taxing the actual economic gains that a person enjoys each year, both realized and unrealized investment income, stocks, other assets, minus legitimate business expenses. So it really only targets people with a net worth of $50 million or more, or an annual income exceeding $5 to $10 million, and intergenerational wealth transfers above $10 million.
Okay.
So it's simple.
So I was actually going to ask you about the intergenerational wealth thing, which we kind of already addressed in the sense of you're not targeting somebody who got like a $50,000 inheritance through like a very modest trailer and some other like a trust fund, a small trust fund or something like that.
Right. Yeah. This doesn't. These kind of things that are out there and that are that we've been talking about aren't for the everyday people.
Right.
These are for the people that for too long have been given great opportunity to amass inordinate amounts of wealth.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that I had read in this, or I had heard when I was listening to that podcast that interview with Katie Fang and now I forgot her name again. Yeah, but she had said that over the last 60 years, $80 trillion have been siphoned from the working class up to the wealthiest among us due to different tax policies. Mm-hmm. So imagine what that $80 trillion could have used for education, science and technology.
Right.
You know, healthcare, easing the tax burden.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it sounds like we pretty much already addressed all that.
Yep.
So then let's see. We've got about 4 minutes left in this hour. What can we talk about for 4
that went
minutes? Fast. Yeah. I mean, we got through a lot of it, but there's a lot more. And what can we do in 4 minutes without getting carried away? How about let's try my 3 advocacy ideas real quick, because that'll go super quickly in the next 3 minutes as Norm is signaling to us. So part of the problem on my end when I'm trying to do my project, and so now it's going to be about me, is that a lot of people in the area did not have good exposure to civics and local civics education. What do you think about like spearheading some type of bill, ordinance, whatever you call it, to make sure everybody like basically understands what their local governments are doing and how they function, so that when people do show up to City Hall and try to get involved, they actually have a decent foundation to know what's going on?
Yeah, so one of the things I firmly believe the Department of Education is vital to our country, because not only does it help protect the rights of vulnerable students to ensure that they are getting the services that they need, whether it's for mental health services, accessibility, services, whether it's harassment, discrimination, like all of that. But I think that we need to take a stand as well through there of enabling like a bare minimum for curriculum that should be taught. Now, I do know that curriculum is done at the state and the district level. Like that's them. But when we did things like the No Child Left Behind, and we have all of these federally mandated tests and so on, all of that, why not say we have to have civics education, media literacy, financial literacy, critical thinking skills?
Right.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. So you're totally on board with that?
Yes.
Because that's what I've noticed. It's just like half the time people that they really have a lack of fundamental knowledge, and I think it would help raise the level of discussion throughout the whole community. So anyway,
awesome. Excellent.
Don't need to hype that any longer, and we do only have about 1 minute before we're going to have to take a 4-minute commercial break.
Okay.
So for those of you listening at home, this has been Terri Reese, who is running for Congress, and she's right now in the Democrat primary,
which will be in June. Yep.
Yes, which is in June. And to quickly re-emphasize part of my introductory report, I very much appreciate you being here and treating the process with respect, because it is not as common as the average person might think. Mm-hmm. It has really been a struggle to get basic information from quite a few candidates. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying all of them. Mm-hmm. Some of them are perfectly fine, like yourself, to show up and communicate and, right. and get the information out there. But again, not all of them. So, in that sense, it looks like you're going to pass my little process verification check, as if I'm really that important. But, you know, I think it is important. You know, mm-hmm. Do we actually know what we're voting for or not? You know, and so
and knowledge is power.
Right. And, mm-hmm. and so I do appreciate you showing up and doing this. But then we're going to bring Dave Summers in for his show, Talk Around Millville, and you are going to stick around for another half an hour? So
I can.
Okay.
Before I have to go home and brine a turkey.
And I'll stick around for about a half an hour or so, too, before I have to go do the next thing. And so for right now, that has been Inform the Vote NJ Radio Hour. This is Steve Soloff. We'll see you next week with a guest that I do not have booked yet.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
When your home needs a new floor, trust Highland Carpet to do the job right. Highland Carpet's professional installers will install the best name brand carpets, hardwood, laminate, or luxury vinyl planking at a great cost. Satisfaction is guaranteed. Visit our showroom, our website, or call today to see what Highland Carpet has to offer you. Highland Carpet, we take pride in what we do so that you can take pride in your home.
Highland Carpet's hours are Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and Saturday, 9 to 3.